Howdy gamers, let's talk about the runes for Riven top lane, as I think that's really her only viable role. The things that she wants from her keystone is like access to extra damage and then effectively a little bit of scaling. And the only keystone that really offers that is Conquer. The only other keystones that would really work on Riven 2 would potentially be something like Electrocute, maybe Dark Harvest, and everything else kind of just doesn't do it for her. The reason that Electrocute isn't that common and also just isn't that good is because one, it's outweighed by Conquer and what it's trying to achieve. Um, but effectively, you could run something like Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, and then take your pick of like Ravenous Hunter or Ultimate Hunter. Both are pretty equally low value for Riven, and yeah. In the mid lane, maybe something like this would be okay, as you could still have more damage and then still have some utility. With Electrocute, whenever you hit 3 separate attacks and abilities, you deal extra damage based on your level and then also based on your bonus AD for Riven. And then with Sudden Impact, you get 7 lethality and 6 magic penetration whenever you use a dash or a leap. So like you would be adding to your burst onto a target. But in most cases, Riven's already going to be killing those targets, and if you're playing it in the mid lane, there's champions that just do that better and then also have extra functionality and then also have wave clear and spike it a lot faster times. So, and then if you were to run something like this in the top lane, it would become even worse, as the extra damage from Electrocute and Sudden Impact wouldn't help you kill a bruiser champion at all. Like, at all. If you were running this into a champion like Syndra mid lane, sure, if you flash onto her and she doesn't land her stun on you, then you've killed her. But in top lane, if you get an Electrocute proc off on a Mordekaiser, he doesn't care. That's like a little bit of extra damage on him, and he just either regens it or it doesn't. It's not setting you up for a lethal that you otherwise wouldn't have. So a lot of value is gained through running Conquer, and with Conquer, it's going to put you in the precision tree. With Conquer, you gain stacks of Adaptive Force whenever you damage an enemy champion. Each instance of damage grants you 2 stacks, so Riven builds this up very, very quickly whenever you're actually hitting an enemy champion, because you have 3 parts of the Q, your E, and then your W. And with Conquer, every stack that you get is going to give you bonus Adaptive Force based on your level. And then once it's fully stacked, you heal for 15% of the damage that you deal. The important thing with Conquer is that it helps you whenever you're getting multiple rotations of your abilities off, as you've built up this bonus AD, and then to make it useful, you need to be hitting more abilities on the enemy champions. With Riven, that doesn't happen until you get a good amount of cooldown reduction and basically just later into the game. With Conquer as well, where you're building up that bonus AD, Riven makes really good use out of it because of her passive, and then because her auto attacks become really prevalent, as you're getting the free bonus AD from Conquer, you're going to be getting the bonus AD from your ult, and then you're going to be dealing a lot more damage with your auto attacks through both of those in combination with Riven's passive. So Conquer does go a long way in that sense, where you're healing for 15% of the damage that you deal. Since Riven has AoE abilities, it makes it really, really high value for her, as in 2v2s, that's when you really start seeing like meaningful amounts of healing, as you can land your abilities on 2 champions. In 5v5, that becomes even more apparent. So that extra healing gives you more effective health to play with regardless of the situation, and it just gets better for you whenever you're hitting more enemy champions. So even if you're having to spend your health to get on top of enemy champions, once Conquer is stacked, which it is almost instantly if you're on top of enemy champions, then you have the opportunity to heal it back as you're killing them. So really synergistic. The bonus AD offered, I think, beats every keystone just because Riven makes such good use out of the bonus AD offered. And the other keystones also are just way off theme for top lane, or just don't help Riven in the laning phase, so, or in the later stages of the game, to do anything that she otherwise couldn't do. So with Conquer being the only keystone that really works, again, it puts you in the precision tree. And then for the secondary runes, I think Triumph's going to be your best bet. Overheal, even though you could build this up with, let's say, like a double Doran's build, the bonus shield offered isn't going to make or break things. And With Triumph, the extra utility in restoring 12% of your missing health whenever you get a kill or assist goes a long way, especially with Riven. Fights are really going to go to the wire, so it does matter to survive by just that much. Or in 2v2s, again, it helps you whenever you kill one target to survive and then go on to fight the next one. In team fights, it's the same concept. You go in, you get a kill or assist, and you can actually survive. And then once your cooldowns are off cooldown, then you can go back in with a amount of health that is easier to play with or more reasonable to play with. For the third rune here, all of these are okay options for Riven. The attack speed would probably help you in matchups like Riven Fiora, where they always have auto attacks up. Tenacity could help you in tank matchups, obviously, but I think Bloodline's going to be your best bet, and probably the most useful in like most matchups. Even if you are playing into tank matchups, Merc Treads is going to be achieving the same thing that Legend Tenacity wants to, and then it's also going to be offering you the magic resist early. So that's going to help you in basically every single tank matchup a lot more. And then with Bloodline, you gain lifesteal that builds up over just like playing the game basically. Every time you get a kill or assist, get a kill on an objective, a large monster, a minion, etc. It builds up pretty naturally. And then you have access to this lifesteal that you just otherwise wouldn't. And again, where you get so much bonus AD from free from Conquer and your ult, Riven makes really good use out of the lifesteal, and you don't really get a build lifesteal until you second item. So it goes a long way, especially in the early game. For the fourth rune, honestly, like I think Coup de Grace is better on Riven, but in the matchups that you're going to be playing in the top lane, you will just get more value out of Last Stand. Again, think of champions like Mordekaiser, where on the first rotation of your abilities, you're just not killing them. So you have to spend your HP initially at the start of a fight to get things going, to build up Conquer, and then through doing so, you'll inevitably deal more damage with the second rotation of your abilities or your follow-up auto attacks with Last Stand. With Last Stand, you deal 5 to 11% increased damage to champions while you are below 60% HP, and the max damage is gained at 30%. With Coup de Grace, you deal 8% more damage to champions who have less than 40% HP. So against squishier champions, Coup de Grace is always going to be better, especially in Riven's like hard-winning matchups, champions like Gnar, Yasuo, etc., and where those champions don't have a lot of HP early or a lot of stats behind them, then Coup de Grace just makes more sense. You can finish them off, and Riven also has a lot of instances of damage in which she can increase with the 8% damage increase from Coup de Grace, because if you're getting that 8% damage increase but every ability is on cooldown, it's not as good. But even if you're just increasing the damage from the auto attacks, it can still be pretty good because you've built up this AD with Conquer, and then you've built up, or you have the bonus AD from the ult, and then Coup de Grace is probably going to be applying to your ult damage, and then the second rotation of your Q, or even just the first instance of it, depending on how the fight starts. But a basic way to look at it is like if you're playing into a squishy champion, Coup de Grace is fine and probably better. But if you're playing into a bruiser or a tank champion, Last Stand's always going to be giving you better values, as you have to spend your HP early against those champions, but through surviving, then you're able to deal more damage to them. So defaultly in the top lane, you're probably going to be running Last Stand most of the time. For the secondary runes, you have interesting options in all of them. You can go Domination with something like Sudden Impact, Ravenous Hunter. I don't think that's that good. You can go Sorcery second with like Nullifying Orb, Transcendence, or Nimbus Cloak and Transcendence. You can go Resolve second with Shield Bash, Bone Plating, and you can even go Inspiration second with Free Boots and Cosmic Insight. I think all of them have their particular advantages in most matchups. I think the worst of all of them is the Domination tree, as it sounds good, but it's not really that effective in its actual use. With Sudden Impact, you gain lethality whenever you use a dash. So anytime you use your QE or flash, you would gain 7 lethality for 5 seconds. That lethality isn't going to go that far, again, in tank matchups top lane. So you might as well just not have this rune, even though it can add to your damage. And then with Ravenous Hunter, you heal for a percentage of damage base or dealt by your abilities. But this healing you need to have multiple of the bounty hunter stacks to build up meaningful amounts of the percentage healing from your abilities for this rune to really matter. And to do that in the top lane is really hard. If you don't have a successful TP before 11 minutes, you're sitting on one stack of Ravenous Hunter for like most of the game, or for the like the post like level 6 laning phase of top lane. So this rune is really, really hard to use in the top lane because it's so hard to build up the bounty hunter stacks consistently across like hundreds of games. So yes, you can get healing from your abilities, but the percentage amount that you get has to be built up with this, or it's really just a useless amount. And you lose out on a lot of laning tools in either Inspiration or Resolve. With Sorcery, I think Nullifying Orbs are really, really strong rune, especially into the really strong champions in top lane, such as Mordekaiser, Rumble, etc. With Nullifying Orb, whenever you take magic damage, that would reduce your health below 30%. You gain a shield that absorbs 40 to 120 based on your level magic damage, and then is only on a 1 minute cooldown. So effectively, anytime you would all in a AP champion in the top lane, you would have Nullifying Orb. And then with this, you end up in the sorcery tree, which is completely fine for Riven, as you can get Transcendence. With Transcendence, you gain this extra scaling, and then it's also going to give you 30% with just one item if you're building Black Cleaver or Trinity as your first item. With Transcendence, you gain 10% cooldown reduction whenever you reach level 10, and excess cooldown reduction is converted into bonus attack damage. So with that, it's going to, even if you're in one of those harder matchups, these just help. It just helps you in both ways. Whenever you're all inning, it helps you, and then since you're like naturally losing these lanes, Transcendence gives you a scaling option just for getting the experience in the lane versus the CS. So both of these kind of go hand in hand. You can also run Nimbus Cloak, which is basically just for your better teleports, as with Nimbus Cloak, after you cast a summoner spell, you gain bonus movement speed that lasts for 2.5 seconds. And the bonus movement speed percentage is based off the cooldown of the summoner spell. So whenever you teleport, you're going to gain a shit ton of movement speed to actually get into position or to get on top of enemies. So it makes your teleports into the bot lane way more impactful, basically, in the early game. And then it makes your flank teleports late game way more impactful. And if that's really what you're playing for, especially if you're playing into losing matchups, it's really, really useful. So not a bad rune on Riven, especially like the way that she plays out. You could also go Gathering Storm, I suppose, but I think Transcendence is probably your better bet, as it's easy enough for Riven to get attack damage through her itemization, and to have an extra like 14 AD at most stages of the game for her isn't going to make or break things. And the Resolve tree, you have good options in Shield Bash and Bone Plating. You also have good options with Second Wind. The thought process you should have whenever you're trying to decide over Second Wind or Bone Plating, if you're playing into a melee matchup, like basically Bone Plating is always going to be better. But if you're playing against melee champions with short range poke abilities, so champions like Mordekaiser, Rumble, Ornn, where even though they're melee, they still have these short range poke abilities that can damage you anytime you go for a CS, Second Wind can give you pretty good values against them. With Second Wind, after you take damage from an enemy champion, you heal for 4% of your missing health plus 6 over 10 seconds. With Bone Plating, whenever you take damage from an enemy champion, the next 3 spells or attacks you receive from them deal 30 to 60 less damage, and it's on a 45-second cooldown. So Second Wind effectively has no cooldown, and then Bone Plating has this 45-second cooldown. And if you're against a ranged champion, you just get no value out of Bone Plating, as they can auto attack you once. Bone Plating's procced. It doesn't block any damage unless they just dump more damage into you for no reason, and then it's on cooldown for 45 seconds. So Second Wind in combination with Doran's Shield helps you get through the early game, which is pretty much Riven's weakest point, and is really good to just survive the lane and then be able to get more CS because of the extra HP that you have, and where things are just safer. With Bone Plating, you get more effective HP, and particularly in melee matchups, especially champions that have to dive onto you, it's going to help a lot, as if you dash onto them, then you're getting a lot of value, as if they turn onto you, then you're going to be blocking their initial damage. If they dive onto you and get the jump onto you, then you're blocking the damage that they deal, and then that helps you turn onto them. So it's useful offensively and defensively, and the damage that it blocks is really absurd for melee matchups, as they need to attack you and then proc the bone plating, but then they're usually following up with another ability almost instantly if they're dedicated to attacking you at that point. So really, really strong rune. Anything else in the resolve tree is kind of misguided. Something like Revitalize, like you just don't heal enough with Riven's kit in general to get good value out of it, and then to get a little bit of bonus shielding on her E just really doesn't matter. Kind of the same thing with Overgrowth, where you can get this bonus HP. It's not bad, but Riven's scaling naturally through her itemization anyways. And then to lose out on the laning tool and Shield Bash just feels a lot worse. With Shield Bash, whenever you're shielded, you gain Armor and Magic Resist, a really negligible amount, and your next basic attack is going to deal a little more damage. So it basically just gives you a little bit of damage for free in combination with bone plating anytime you use your shield. So that into melee matchups is probably going to be your best bet. With Inspiration Second, you get good tools to like survive the lane, or like you basically get like a free reward for not losing the early game actually, in Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. With Magical Footwear, you get free boots at 12 minutes, so you're saving 300 gold. And then with Cosmic Insight, you get 5% cooldown reduction on your abilities, items, and summoner spells. So you just have more TPs and more flashes, and then that 5% cooldown reduction does go pretty far, even just in your early levels like 1 to 8 for Riven, because her abilities are on pretty significant cooldowns until you get levels into them. So yeah, I think into losing matchups in which you can't fight them at all, Cosmic Insight and Free Boots is fine. A more scaling option, and then Free Boots and Cosmic Insight helps you spike at like mid game. I think Transcendence and Nimbus Cloak gives you more playmaking potential, and then helps you spike mid to late game, as your flanks inevitably are more impactful with Teleport. And then with more impactful teleports with Nimbus Cloak, then it's going to help you set up for just have more potential for better TPs into the bot lane or into the mid lane or wherever a fight's happening on the map. And then if a TP is successful, then you're really able to take over a match from there. If you're playing into a melee matchup, I think Shield Bash and Bone Plating is going to be your best bet, as it gives you better laning tools and gives you more effective HP to play with whenever you're building up Conquer, and then also using like your first rotation of abilities on an enemy bruiser champion in the top lane, as Riven doesn't kill like any of them initially. And then for the shards, probably just go Adaptive Force, and then depending on your lane matchup, you want to switch the resistance. So obviously if you're playing into AD matchups, Gnar, Yasuo, Camille, etc., you want the armor. And then if you're playing into AP matchups, champions like Rumble, Mordekaiser, etc., you obviously want the magic resist. What I don't see many people doing is running the cooldown reduction shard though. Again, if you're playing into a losing matchup early and you're basically conceding the early levels, then I think running Cosmic Insight in combination with the cooldown reduction shard is really strong, because you get like this scaling cooldown reduction. You're going to be sitting on around 67% most of the game since you're playing in the top lane from this, and that's pretty good, as with just one item you can have around 30% CDR with Cosmic Insight plus this cooldown reduction shard, and then with 2 items in Black Cleaver, Death's Dance, then you can have 40% CDR, or a little bit over 40% in 41, 42. But regardless, you're going to get like this extra percentage that's going to really just let you spike even harder, and all you're giving up is 6 attack damage for it. And in matchups in which you can't even touch the enemy laner, levels like 1 to 10, what's the point of this 6 attack damage? So the scaling cooldown reduction shard is really strong for Riven, and I don't think I've ever seen I don't think I've ever seen a Riven run this. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on Riven runes. Most of the variations coming in with the secondary rune option, and I just really don't see another Keystone outweighing Conquer, because the bonus AD offered goes so far for her, and everything in the precision tree also just works really well for her in Bloodline and Triumph. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Riven runes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I answer literally all of them. If this video helped you, leaving a like on the video helps me. You know, maybe subscribe. Maybe subscribe. Maybe. Hey, maybe subscribe. You could subscribe. Maybe.